lifelong bachelor and classic car collector, Byron Wright looks like he has finally met the woman of his dreams. A jailhouse informant has a story for two detectives about a murder that neither has ever heard a whisper about.
All the little details, it was really an unusual one.
It is confirmed that human remains have been found beneath the concrete floor of a garage. Detective Jim Scharf of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department has just received the news he has been waiting weeks to hear.
The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know is those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this. Bring some peace to the family, at least. I was just doing my job.
Michelle Donahue has the unfortunate job of telling her sister-in-law that her husband, Byron Wright, has decided to run off with another woman. Sharon Deal, the sister of Byron Wright, has just received a disturbing phone call from his wife, Michelle Donahue. Growing up close as children, Sharon and Byron have always looked out for each other. But since Byron's marriage to Michelle, they seldom talk and no longer see each other as often. Byron always seems to be far too busy to call or attend family gatherings like he used to. Sharon has decided to file a missing persons report with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department. It is unlike her brother to leave everything he's worked so hard for behind. Arlington is that perfect mixture of rural and big city. In the northern part of Snohomish County in Washington state, the city of Arlington is part of the Seattle metropolitan area.
The city lies at the base of the western foothills of the Cascade Mountains, alongside the Stillaquamish River. It's a place attractive to both city dwellers and lovers of the outdoors. One of the biggest employers in that area of the state is Boeing. The Boeing site is so big it has its own security team, fire department, several cafes and coffee shops, even a daycare center.
Boeing has over 30,000 workers at its Everett facility. One of these workers is Byron Wright, a longtime employee and a very well-liked one. Byron was born in 1951 and grew up in a broken home. In the late 1950s, his father walked out on the family, leaving his mother to raise 4 young children as a single parent on government assistance. Growing up poor, Byron had a strong work ethic, and after working at Boeing for a number of years, was able to buy a beautiful piece of rural property with a large garage and mobile home. At the same time, he also bought a second empty piece of property beside the first. Byron is also a huge fan of restoring and racing classic cars. He has worked hard since his teenage years to build a considerable collection, reportedly worth almost $500,000. Some of his vehicles include a rare Corvette Stingray, a '65 Chevy Malibu, a couple of Chevelles, and a race car.
One of Byron's best friends described him as a homebody who had no children of his own but doted on his nieces. He would spend every holiday with his siblings and their children, and he loved to hand out silly gifts.
Though Byron has always seemed to prefer spending time working on his classic cars or with a small group of friends, he's not opposed to going out for a drink or two to the local bar to unwind after a day at work. 21-year-old Michelle Donahue is a wild child who left home at an early age because of conflicts against her strict upbringing. Popular and known as a social butterfly, she has already been married, divorced, and has a young daughter named Heather. Michelle decides she needs to start getting out more. She is lonely and bored and soon meets Byron Wright at a neighborhood tavern. Though shy and not usually one to socialize, Byron is drawn to the charismatic Michelle. Even though Byron is 14 years Michelle's senior, they quickly fall in love and decide to share a life together. Michelle and her daughter, Heather, soon move into Byron's house on Wade Road, and they are married in 2000. By all accounts, Michelle and Byron were very happy together. Michelle also had an interest in classic cars and could hold her own in a conversation when talking about them. Her daughter, Heather, says one of her favorite things to do together as a family on a nice day was to jump into Byron's classic convertible, put the top down, and the three of them would cruise down the highway. Tension has been steadily rising the last year or so in the home between Byron and Michelle. While Heather adores her stepfather, Michelle is tired of being stuck with a homebody, and all she really wants to do is go out with her friends and party. Heather spends more and more time at her father and stepmother's house and decides to go away with them on a family vacation to Ireland.
It can be very hard for children to trust a new step-parent after witnessing a divorce, especially a contentious one. Children can also feel guilt towards their biological parent and feel they're being disloyal if they bond with the new step-parent.
To add to the stress, Byron is becoming increasingly isolated from his own family and friends. There are complaints that since he married Michelle, she has stopped him from having a relationship with anybody that was part of his life from before their marriage. Byron Wright has gone ahead and done something nobody could have imagined. Michelle alleges that, tired of the constant arguing at home, he's decided to run off to Wisconsin with a wealthy, redheaded 20-something who drives an expensive sports car. In doing so, he's left everything behind, including his job, his car collection, his house, and 2 properties. Worst of all, Michelle and Heather. Michelle has kept it secret for almost a month, hoping that Byron would come back before she has to tell anybody that he has even left. Finally, she makes the decision to call his sister, Sharon, and tell her what has happened. The Byron who ran off with another woman and left everything behind is not the Byron that his family and friends know. He has worked too long and hard to ever leave his beloved car collection behind, no matter how wealthy his new girlfriend might be. Sharon makes call after call to other family, friends, and co-workers of Byron. Except for calling in sick to his job at Boeing for a couple of days, nobody has seen or heard from him for over a month now. It's time to make a police report. But is Byron really even missing? This is a question that will take almost 10 years to answer. Lifelong bachelor and classic car collector Byron Wright might have finally met the woman of his dreams. But tension between Byron and Michelle has been steadily rising in the home over the past year. Byron Wright has gone ahead and done something nobody could have imagined. Michelle's daughter Heather returns from a vacation with her father to Ireland and immediately goes over to see her mom and Byron. She doesn't know yet that Byron is gone for good and has left everything behind. She is shocked and can't understand what has happened, especially when even the closet is still full of Byron's clothes and his beloved car collection still sits outside. Heather is still hurt and confused that Byron has left her and her mother for another woman. Even as young as she is, it doesn't seem like something he would do. To cheer her up, Michelle decides to surprise Heather with a small sledding hill in their backyard.
There wasn't a lot to do for an only child in this rural location, and and Heather always loved the outdoors. Michelle ordered 4 loads of fill and 36 yards of dirt. And as soon as it snowed, Heather had the perfect hill to slide on.
Sharon and Byron's other siblings and friends have spent a month trying to track him down. Nobody seems to know who this wealthy redhead with the expensive sports car is, or why he would take off to Wisconsin with her and leave everything and everyone behind without a word. Sharon has decided to file a missing persons report with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department.
Unfortunately for Sharon and the rest of his family and friends, the Sheriff's Department doesn't think it's necessary to issue a missing person report or investigate further. From their point of view, he's an adult male. If it's his decision to run off with a younger woman, leaving behind a job of 23 years and his prized car collection, that's his decision to make.
Michelle almost immediately files for divorce and tells everyone how Byron has run off with another woman, deserting her and Heather. He threw it in her face that his new love is a younger, wealthier woman, and he no longer needs his job at Boeing or anything from his old life with Michelle.
Michelle moves on quickly and soon meets Joel Donahue, who is also into cars and partying. The two hit it off, and Joel soon moves into the Byron home on Wade Road. In the meantime, Michelle files for divorce by absentia. It's granted when Byron doesn't show up for proceedings. That means everything goes to Michelle. The house, the cars, his pension.
The newlyweds are having a great time, spending the money Michelle received from her divorce to Byron. In addition, Michelle also receives a $124,000 payout from Byron's Boeing pension. Vacations, gambling, shopping, and just plain having fun top their list of what to spend the money on. Byron, driving off into the sunset with his new love interest and deserting Michelle and her daughter Heather, is nothing but a distant memory.
In December of 2013, my partner was Joe Dunn, and we were working cold cases. And Joe had a good rapport with a lot of people on the street. He got to know a lot of people that were involved in auto thefts and things of that nature. So this guy gets booked into jail on an auto theft where he's stripping cars, and he tries to contact Joe, telling him that he needs to talk to him about a murder. Well, Joe isn't around to get the message, so I think it took a week, and the guy is persistent, sends another message to Joe saying, I really need to talk to you. Well, Joe figures the guy is just looking for a way to get out of jail because he just knows the type of person this guy is. He's basically a career criminal because he's a drug addict and he's a thief. And he's been in and out of jail and prison for so many years. He's just never going to be rehabilitated.
The inmate's persistence in trying to contact Dunn finally pays off. He is a story for the two detectives about a murder that neither has ever heard a whisper about before.
So he gets us to come over and talk to him. I'm hoping that we get a tip that solves a case that I know that we already have as an unsolved murder. We get over there and we get all the information out of this guy, and none of it sounds like any cold case that I've ever worked on. And Joe also believes that this sounds like a legitimate story too. So we get this story, and immediately we realize that a guy by the name of Byron Wright is probably missing and could be a victim of a murder by his wife, and that she killed him and put him in the backyard of her residence.
According to the informant, Michelle Donahue had buried her husband Byron Wright out beside the garage and covered it with a mound of dirt she had brought in.
So she recruited 3 people to move the body so that it can never be found. 3 people moved the body underneath a concrete slab in a garage that Byron Wright had built because he was a car guy. And as the story went, one of the guys who helped move the body and put it under the floor of the garage had told this informant the story, and now this informant was bringing it to us so they could help him get out of jail on the charges that he was on. But all the information sounded to me like it was very plausible and that we really needed to look into what happened to Byron Wright. This informant, he also told us about what he had been doing with the husband of the woman that committed the murder and another guy that lived in the garage on the property, that they were all stealing cars and stripping them on the property, and that the husband of the wife was not living in the house with the wife, but he was living in a camp trailer on the property with a pregnant girlfriend.
The informant is uneasy with all of the stolen auto parts around and stripping vehicles on the property, when clearly Michelle is not on board.
The informant brought up the question, hey, we're causing too much problem here for Michelle that she's gonna call the cops on us if we're not careful. We gotta be worried about what we're doing here because we're gonna get caught. And if the cops don't catch us, Michelle's gonna tip them off. And the friend says, oh, no. We don't have to worry about Michelle because Michelle killed her previous husband and recruited Joel, her current husband, and me and Walter Shue to move the body. And we buried it under the slab of the concrete garage here. And when the guy looked at the floor, he could tell that there was a nice finish to the concrete everywhere in the garage except this one corner where it was large enough to probably bury 5 bodies in. There was that much concrete torn up that was repaved and poorly surfaced. So everything fit that he believed that Michelle's first husband was murdered and put there. And he was telling us that this happened. My immediate thought was, this all sounds plausible, and what we need to do is, first of all, we need to find out who this first husband was, find out when he was last seen to see if he's still alive somewhere, and if he's not, then this story is probably true. And if it's true, how can we get it resolved? So I asked the guy directly, I said, would you be willing to wear a wire and a recorder and go back in and talk to Mike that was living in the garage and get him to tell you this whole story in as much detail as you can get out of him while you're on this recording so that we can get a search warrant based on that story and search the garage and find the body and solve the case? You got to be careful when you use informants because you got to be able to verify everything that they tell you because they could be telling you lies.
Using confidential informants is always risky business when it comes to prosecutions and police investigations. On the one hand, if the information that they provide is reliable, they can get certain benefits, such as financial compensation, a reduce in their sentence, or potentially even transferred to a different facility if this happened while in custody. On the flip side, they do always run the risk of being found out by the criminal organizations that they've worked with, but in the end, they're always looking out for themselves.
Now, all we had to do was arrange with the prosecutor to get him released from jail to be able to go up there and try to get this recording done. So Joe and I initially looked into Byron's missing status, and we also went back to verify everything that he told us about the trucks that they were stealing and the car parts they were taking, and they were being sold for drugs and all of this stuff. Well, he told us that 2 of the trucks that they stole and stripped, they dumped them behind a barn just down the hill off of Wade Road from where Michelle lived. So Joe and I go up there, and sure enough, there's the trucks that he said would be there that were stolen, and we ran them, and they come back stolen. So everything that he told us, we were able to verify. So then we ended up being able to find his sister, and his sister said, yeah, I tried to report Byron missing. We contacted the Boeing company, and they said, yeah, his last day of work was here. There was some notes that they had gotten saying that he was going to be sick for a couple days and before he quit showing up altogether. So there was documentation that we were able to find that he just flat disappeared right around this day. And I think it was like October or November of 2004.
Detectives now know that Byron Wright is truly missing. But is it true that his body is buried under the floor of his own garage? Michelle Donahue tells friends that her husband, Byron Wright, has left for another woman and moved to Wisconsin. Almost a decade later, an informant offers police some shocking information. He claims some guys he knows at a local chop shop told him how they buried a body.
I asked him, are you willing to be recorded? And he told us that he was.
Detectives have come up with a plan for the informant to get the guys talking about the body they supposedly buried.
I heard and knew that the Major Crimes Unit had been out in Gold Bar the previous month recovering a body that was buried in a backyard underneath a pile of wood. The story on that case was really bizarre. They believed that his wife had helped him escape from prison in Missouri, and he just flat disappeared, and this was like years ago. Well, when he got sick and was terminal, he told his wife, when I die, you can't call the coroner and tell him to come and get my body. You got to hide it, because if they figure out who I am, they're going to know who you are, and they're going to arrest you for helping me escape from prison and hiding me out all these years. He died, and she had him buried behind the house, and they covered him up with a wood pile. The FBI got involved somehow. Somebody told them that this guy might be buried there and that he might have been this fugitive that they had been looking for. The Major Crimes Unit ended up going out there and digging under the wood pile and finding a body and recovering it. And they were still in the process of identifying it as that fugitive escapee. So that's why it hadn't been reported into the news yet. And they didn't want to put it in the news until they got DNA confirmation that it was him. I knew the story, and I thought this was a golden opportunity to put that information in the Everett Herald newspaper so that we could take him out of jail and have him take this newspaper down there and show it to Mike and say, hey, Mike, they found this body buried up in Gold Bar, just to open up the conversation and get Mike talking about the body that he helped bury under the concrete floor in the garage. So people thought this was a good idea, and it was really what we needed to open up the conversation so that we didn't make our informant look like he was tricking anybody, because first of all, he'd had such criminal history that it wouldn't be likely that he would even be out of jail. So they were going to probably be questioning the fact that he was even free when he shouldn't be. And if he's pumping him for information without having a good excuse to do it, they probably would shut down and not tell him anything. So I convinced him that this newspaper story was the ideal lead-in to get the guy talking so that we could record the story about what happened to Byron. And we got the prosecutor on board, we got the Herald on board, and they printed the story on the front page of the Everett Herald on the day that the prosecutor was willing to let our informant out to go and try to make this contact. We had to get the courts to agree to release him, and we had to have him on an ankle bracelet monitor before we could get all this set up. And we got it all set up, and we got him out of jail. We got the newspaper article that came out that morning, and we drove him all the way up, and we dropped him off just down the street from Michelle Donahue's house. He walked down to the back, went into the garage with the newspaper, and started a conversation up with Mike. Our informant shows Mike the newspaper, and Mike reads it, and he says, well, they're not going to find this body. It's buried under 6 feet of dirt under a concrete floor. Ground-penetrating radar isn't even going to find it because it's too deep. So they're never going to find this body.
Michelle is deep in debt. So deep, she is worried that she will lose the property to foreclosure, and the secret she has kept for the last 7 years will be found out. Finally, she decides that she needs to tell Joel what really happened to her previous husband.
Well, that opens up the conversation to where the informant's now saying, well, how did the body get here? Who all put it here? Well, it was me and Joel and Walter. Michelle told us that she had killed her husband and buried him in the backyard. And she was worried that she was going to lose this house because she was in debt so deep that she came to Joel and said, I killed my first husband and buried him back here. And if we don't get him off of this property and get him out of here to where he's never going to be found, I could end up in prison. So Joel and Mike and Walter Shue got together and started talking about it and decided, well, we don't want to take the chance on transporting it somewhere else. Why don't we just chop up the concrete and dig a hole and bury him right here in the middle of the night? Nobody's caught us stripping cars here, so they're not going to catch us moving a body. So he's telling him all this story on a tape. He said when we dug up the body, it was in 3 different plastic bags, and it stunk horribly. So we had rented this bobcat, and we chopped up the concrete, and we dug a hole with the bobcat. They went down and they got this great big Tupperware tub and put the body in it, and then they tried to pour stuff over to make it decay better, and put a lid on it, and we put it in this hole 6 feet deep, and we threw the bags with the other body parts in next to it, and we covered it up, and we poured a concrete floor over it again.
Mike also tells the informant that after the 3 of them finally finished reburying Byron's remains and pouring the concrete over the hole they had dug, they decided they should also say a few words as a type of service.
The informant took a picture of the concrete floor that was a really poor job of finishing cement, and he texted us the pictures, and we had all the information that we needed at that point to get a search warrant to search the garage.
An informant tells Seattle detectives that he has information that he heard his partners at a local chop shop discussing how they disposed of a body on the property. Is this related to Byron Wright's disappearance a decade ago? The detectives formulate a plan for the informant to learn more from his partners, using a local newspaper story as cover.
The Major Crimes Unit had been out in Gold Bar recovering a body in a backyard underneath a pile of wood.
The informant is told that this is a different body and is then told exactly how and where they buried their body.
After the informant got the story from Mike, he was still hanging out with Mike that day. Michelle was married to Joel, but they weren't getting along, and Joel was living with a pregnant girlfriend in the camper on the property.
Mike and the informant, who is still wearing his wire, head to the casino to pick up Michelle and give her a ride home from work.
She worked at the Tulalip Casino, and she needed a ride home that night. So the informant, it took him a while that day to be able to get the whole story. So now they're down at the casino picking up Michelle, and they're driving her home. And they talk about her problems that she's having with her husband. The informant ends up contacting us, and I end up meeting the informant back near the casino, and I get the recording from him that night. I'm listening to the recording on the weekend, and I hear a discussion that happened with Michelle where she brings up her problems that she's having with Joel. And she ends up saying she would like to have some way of getting rid of him. Heard her say something with the word murder.
Not only is it likely that Michelle Donahue's first husband, Byron Wright, is buried under the garage floor, it sounds like she is hoping that her present husband, Joel Donahue, will soon be joining him.
Because of all the information that we had in the recording from Mike and all the investigation that we had done to show that Byron went missing in 2004, and that we verified everything else that the informant told us was true, we were able to get a search warrant for the property to dig up the body. So we had to contact the county public works department to get the equipment out there to do this. We had the state anthropologist there to be able to tell us that when we dug up some bones that they were human bones. We had the medical examiner's office there to take custody of the body once we located it.
The last thing Michelle thought would happen that morning is, instead of going to work, that she was going to be arrested.
We planned to go out to the house and serve the warrant. I was assigned to take Michelle Donahue into custody and that we were going to interview her, while other people were assigned to interview Joel and the girlfriend and Mike, anybody else that we found.
The forensic anthropologist from the King County Medical Examiner's Office confirms that human remains have been found buried underneath a concrete slab. The arms and legs were wrapped in bags and a tarp, buried in the dirt alongside a large plastic blue bin. It contained the rest of the body of Byron Wright.
I feel it's time to confront her. So I confront her that we know that your husband didn't just disappear. We know that he's been buried on your property because we just dug him up. So we've recovered his body on your property. And she's like, really? She tried to play dumb that she had no idea that there was a body on her property. Then we kept telling her that we've talked to Joel. Joel's told us everything you've told him. So we want to know what happened. And she's like, well, I didn't kill him. Well, if you didn't kill him, then who did? And why are you telling other people that you did do it? So she finally got to the point that she didn't want to talk to us anymore. Part of the story that we were getting from the other people was that Michelle had told them the reason that they needed to move this body was because she and Byron got into this big argument in the kitchen. And he came at her, and she had to defend herself. She stabbed him with a knife to keep him away from her, and that's how she ended up maybe accidentally killing him, and that's why they had to get rid of his body. So we had that information, too. I ended up getting up and leaving the room to go find out what Joel was telling the other detectives. And Joel was telling them the whole story about how Michelle had asked him to move the body and how he was killed by this stabbing. He demonstrated that she was backing away going like this, and he came into the knife, and that's what stabbed him. And he fell on the floor, and she left the house. And when she came back, he was dead. The whole crew was there to dig up the body while we were interviewing Michelle and Joel. So as soon as we left with the witnesses and the suspect, the whole team and crew went down to the garage, And the person that had the ground-penetrating radar said, yes, there's definitely something in this area. And he spray painted it and marked it all on the concrete, and then used jackhammers to remove the concrete, and then to get down to where they found the great big Tupperware tub, and they removed it. They found some bags that were thrown in around the tub that had body parts in them. And the state anthropologist examined them all, opened the tub, and found that there was plaster or something poured all over the body, but the head was in there, and it was all taken down to the medical examiner's office that day. And we kept her there at the North Precinct under arrest until I was able to get the booking paperwork done and got her transported to the jail and booked for second-degree murder that night.
Michelle Donahue had no idea that when she left home earlier in the day, it would be the last time for quite a while. Fingerprinted, charged, and with bail set at $1 million, Donahue is about to start a whole new unexpected chapter in her life. Lifelong bachelor and classic car collector Byron Wright thought he had finally met the woman of his dreams. He had no idea that she would be the one to destroy them instead.
And she ends up saying on the tape she would like to have some way of getting rid of him. Heard her say something with the word murder.
After months of working with an informant, investigators from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department are finally going to learn if their source is correct. Is Byron Wright's body buried under the floor of his garage?
I went probably the next day to the autopsy, and they removed the body. And even though this was in 2014, 10 years later, she had wrapped him in plastic and a sheet to where when they opened him up, you could still see that there was a slice mark all the way around his throat. And there were numerous stab wounds all over his back. The medical examiner said that one of the stab wounds hit him right in the spine and the spinal cord, which could have paralyzed him at that point from being able to fight back. But all of the injuries were either the upper back or neck or the throat. And he was only wearing underpants, and he was wrapped in a sheet. Well, when they searched the house, we found 2 pillowcases with the same pattern on them.
After the autopsy is concluded, Detective Jim Scharf now knows that Michelle's whole story about accidentally stabbing Byron while trying to defend herself is nothing but a giant pack of lies.
Some murderers continue to deny their guilt because they don't believe there is enough evidence to prove they are responsible, or they believe they are smarter than law enforcement. Others continue to deny their involvement because they themselves can't face the truth of their own actions.
Michelle Donahue decides to change her plea to guilty once she is confronted with the overwhelming evidence. She enters her plea on July 11th, 2014.
In this case, Snohomish County District Court Judge George Bowden decided to sentence Donahue to 16 years instead of the 15 years that had been agreed to in the plea bargain. He did this so that he could get the maximum amount of supervision while out of custody, which was 3 years in this case. Most states have their own sentencing guidelines, so it varies depending on state to state, unless it's a federal crime.
Judge Bowden goes on to tell the court at the sentencing that 6 people have filed victim impact statements. They all feel that Donahue should have been charged with first-degree murder. However, it is felt that the state could not have proved premeditation. The judge explains to the victims that he can only sentence to the agreed-upon guilty plea of second-degree murder.
Victim impact statements were created to give victims, friends, and family an opportunity to be involved in the proceedings. They're able to provide insights into who the victim was, as well as detail the mental, emotional, and sometimes financial effects that the crime had on them. Victim impact statements allows them to say what kind of person the victim was and what they meant to them.
Michelle Donahue is allowed to speak at her sentencing and in tears apologizes to Byron's family, saying she is so very sorry for taking his life and that there is nothing she can do to ease their pain.
This was a really unusual case. The way that it happened and the way that it all fell together and all the little details that we found out about from it, it was really an unusual one. But it was nice that we were able to get it put together so quickly and find his body, and that she pled guilty and we didn't have to wait for a year for it to go to trial.
Of course, there are always children that will emulate their parents' criminality, whether because they haven't experienced life any other way or they're looking for approval. It may also be out of fear of what would happen to them if they don't. There are plenty of children who grow up to resent their parents' behavior. In some cases, they are the ones that turn their parents into the authorities.
It's really sad because her daughter was right there in the middle of all of this, and she didn't have anything to look up to her mom. She realized their mom is this evil person, and it's sad that you have to grow up and realize that about your own parent. She was just a totally good person that came out of this horrible situation. When you put somebody that's a cold-blooded killer away, you just got the satisfaction to know that they finally got the system to deal with them properly.
Michelle Donahue was sentenced to 16 years for the murder of Byron Wright. She was given credit for pleading guilty, accepting responsibility, and not having any prior criminal record. Upon her release, Donahue will be under 3 years required supervision and have to pay restitution. Joel Donahue and the 2 accomplices that helped move and rebury the body of Byron Wright were never charged due to the statute of limitations expiring. A few years later, Donahue died in a car accident.
The main thing is for the family to know that they're held accountable and that they have the answers to what happened.